Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is World Now. I am Precious Amayu. Let's start off in Asia, where at least 10 people have been killed, and then hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced as a border conflict between Thailand and Cambodia escalates. The U.S. asked both nations to cease hostilities immediately as border clashes extend to a third day. The U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, says Thailand and Cambodia must follow de-escalatory measures outlined in a peace accord brokered by President Donald Trump in October. President Trump has also said that he would make a phone call to stop the fighting, which is the most serious escalation since clashes in July killed a number of persons. Now, both countries are trading blames over the reignition of the armed conflict, which has seen airstrikes and exchanges of artillery fire. Thailand officials say they evacuated more than 400,000 persons, while Cambodia says it has moved 100,000 persons to shelters. Thailand's defense ministry says its actions were limited in scope and employed as a last option. Cambodia, on its part, blames Thailand for launching aggressive military attacks that targeted civilian institutions. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is urging both sides to avoid a further escalation by exercising restraint. All right, let's speak more on this latest escalation between Cambodia and Thailand. I'm joined by Collins Nweke, who joins me from Brussels, Belgium, via Zoom to speak more on this. He's a global affairs analyst. Good to have you join us, Collins.
Thank you. Thank you, Precious, for having me.
So I just want to, first of all, I think I read a piece you wrote on TVC News website, www.tvcnews.tv. Brilliant piece, by the way. We'll get to that in just a moment. But this is quite shocking in terms of the escalation of this particular conflict, because it was just in October, less than 2 months ago, that President Trump brokered a truce between both countries. And it seemed in Malaysia, and it seemed really, he called it historic or historical. Why do you think that brokered truce collapsed so quickly?
Well, the truce, if that was really what it was, proved fragile because it addressed only the symptoms, okay? Now, that symptom is actually the immediate fighting and not the root causes. Now, the 1907 treaties map colonial legacy and decades of conflicting national narratives over sovereignty remain unsolved. As a matter of fact, they have not even touched the periphery of that main issue. Neither side accepted a definitive demarcation of the border, leaving room for renewed clashes. Moreover, domestic political pressure in Thailand and Cambodia, to show strength or defend sovereignty, whatever, the actual reason is, created incentives to return to force once trust, weakened. In short, external mediation can pause violence. There is absolutely no doubt about that, and we have seen that pause, take place over the last 2 months. But it cannot resolve structural disputes overnight, and so that is essentially why we have this, renewed hostility between the two countries.
And I wanted to also ask you, so one of the things he has said, which, it seems a bit, well, maybe he can't achieve it, but, to just basically make a phone call and to end the hostilities and the conflict, that's what he said he would do, that he would make a phone call to end the hostilities. And that's because it is war we're talking about, or conflict, and not necessarily like a squabble between two friends. And I'm wondering if his involvement will help or hurt the process.
Well, yeah, I think by now we've all gotten used to, the simplification of Donald Trump, of complex issues. Let's recall Precious, and I believe we talked about it, during his campaign to be president. he also told us that within 24 hours, he was going to, if elected president, he's going to resolve the, Ukraine-Russian war. Nearly a year down the line, I mean, we're still, on it. Well, in short term, having a high-level, person, a global figure like Trump, helps spotlight the issue. There is absolutely no doubt about that, because the spotlight is on the issue, and that is good. It adds weight to ceasefire agreements and brings pressure, for negotiation. We saw that also with Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, just a week or two ago. But in the long run, Precious, unless local stakeholders, governments, military, communities, commit to a credible diplomatic demarcation process, the involvement of outsiders cannot substitute for mutual trust. In fact, external mediation may even create false optimism, like we have seen just 2 months, and the naive ones amongst them may have believed that, yes, finally, peace has come. Parties might see the ceasefire as a cover to rearm, making a relapse, like we have seen now, even more dangerous than the initial conflict.
Absolutely, because it is this actual conflict now, it has escalated even more than the one that broke out in July. But I also want to ask what has to happen now to prevent any further escalation, and do you see any prospect for lasting peace?
Well, first and foremost, both sides need to recommit to de-escalatory steps and to restore ceasefire. And maintain clear communication. They've got to, keep talking. Secondly, there should be renewed diplomatic engagement with neutral, credible mediators, regional or international. It doesn't really matter, to oversee a definitive border demarcation, because that is where the issue is, border demarcation. Thirdly, humanitarian concerns, protection of civilians, aid and safe corridors must be prioritized. Fourth, government must engage in confidence-building measures, including transparency, joint civilian protection, and perhaps cultural, historical dialogues to address identity issues. Now, these are, 4 steps that, I believe that should be put in place, followed through. This is not just a border fight, it's a legacy of colonial era maps, competing, histories and national identities. So a ceasefire is not peace. Peace needs border demarcated, grievances addressed, and trust, built or, rebuilt.
And we continue to see those border conflicts around the world, whether it's Israel, Palestine, whether it's Eritrea, Tanzania, or India, Pakistan. There's just a lot of them going on around the world due to that colonial era rule. But I also wanted to ask, because you mentioned what the idea of mediators, and you said it could be regional mediators. But I also wanted to ask the risk for regional stability. This is one region that, to an extent, has been doing beyond the natural disasters we've seen, but has been doing really well in terms of its commercial trade. They focus now so much now on trade, and so to have Cambodia and Thailand have an escalating conflict, what does it mean for that region, the regional stability?
Well, it means a lot. The stake here is, very high. Renewed fighting threatens regional stability, especially for when, border populations, displaced civilians and refugee flows. It also risks drawing in external powers, for instance, via diplomatic pressure, alliances, or economic leverage, which could complicate Southeast Asia dynamics. Moreover, civilian casualties and displacement can fuel humanitarian crises, further strain bilateral relations, and even draw condemnation for or sanctions internationally. So you see, in calling for calm and dialogue, we must remember ceasefires are fragile, but people's lives are not. The renewed violence along the Thai-Cambodia border shows that peace, to be real, must be built on clear borders, shared respect for history, and commitment to protect civilians. I mean, it's time for all stakeholders, national, regional mediators, international partners, to all step beyond, headline diplomacy, because this is essentially what this is, and invest in sustainable, verifiable settlement, because lasting peace is not, negotiated in flat
And
points.
Mr. Wenke, I want to explore that further with you, because you're making a really very critical point when you look at the fact that some of the two out of the peace that President Trump has brokered recently are now at a risk of even further escalation, especially this one and the one between Rwanda and DRC Congo. We'll speak more on that after this break, and we'll just expand this even further. I will take a break now, everyone. When we return, we'll continue our conversation with Mr. Collins Oweke, who is a global affairs analyst. Stay with us.
Thank you for having me.
I just also wanted to speak, before we move into the broader conversation, just wanted to also speak to the international implication of this. The United Nations Secretary General has weighed in asking both sides to de-escalate tension. But what is the international implication for this, especially when you consider the fact that when we have conflicts like this, you find that all sides, most countries rather, begin to take sides, depends on who is supplying weapons to who, like we see in the case of Pakistan and India. And so what does this mean in terms of, the international order?
The international order, with every conflict that is, resolved, through headline mediation, the international order, gets into new era of, of threat, of risk. Historic grievances meet contemporary firepower in Thailand and Cambodia. Now, the international community must move beyond, what I described earlier as a headline mediation to sustained accompaniment. Now, the UN Secretary General did what they typically do, call for, ceasefire and so on and so forth. Those are generic, because Southeast Asia risks a conflict whose aftershocks will outlive any ceasefire architect. Trump delivered a pause, not a peace. No external broker, no matter how forceful, can substitute for political will at home, right there on the ground. When nations outsource peace, they often import its fragility. That is one point that needs to be, emphasized and re-emphasized. So yes, sustainable peace must begin at home, and there are rules to these games. Engage both sides, build the political will, and then external, partners, including the United Nations and all of that, regional powers, then step in.
And why are we not seeing China play a major role in some of this mediation? I mean, for Myanmar, when that coup took place, a lot of people felt that China would step in and mediate, but it did not. And they were seeing this conflict, even the India-Pakistan conflict. We understand that, China supplies weapons to Pakistan, but at least a lot of people felt that China can't step in some of these conflicts and mediate, and not the US, who now plays, that role. Why do you think we've not seen China step up?
The reason we haven't seen China stepped up can be alluded to the point that you made, in terms of, supplying weapons to one side. This is not a confirmation of it, because I am not in a position, I do not have the intelligence wherewithal to be able to ascertain that. But yes, these things are actually powered by national interest. Now, every country has its own interest, be it economic, be it political, be it geopolitical. Now, in the case of China, this is a country that puts its money where its mouth is. And so, yes, the simple answer, and brutal one for that matter, is that it doesn't immediately align with their national interest to intervene in the manner that the world expects them to do. Now, will they remain complacent? No, absolutely not. And so that is why the bodies like the United Nations and regional powers would have to take on that role of organizing the table. I mean, not Trump, not any other, single Western power. So that's what I believe is happening there.
So I just want to refer to your piece again, which again I must say that is really brilliant. It's titled, just to let everyone know, it's titled "When Ceasefire Is Not Peace: A Lens on Trump Pauses Called Peace." And just the opening paragraph there, I like, it was really striking. And you said there is a profound difference between the act of silencing guns and the work of ending a war, which is what we see most times, what ceasefire really is. We've seen ceasefire being brokered by Trump now at both of them, Thailand, Cambodia, Rwanda, DRC, at risk of even further escalation. Fighting hasn't stopped in DRC. Why do you think that despite all of the efforts, a lot of people also say, look, the Israel-Hamas deal is also hanging in the balance. While with all of the efforts, we continue to see that some of these conflicts escalate even further.
Well, thank you. Thank you for, spotlighting the opinion editorial, which, by the way, TVC also published on their website, and I'm grateful for giving it visibility. Now, the point is very clear, Precious. There are, set rules to these games. Now, some of us, watching Trump, his, style and all of that, we're like, well, okay, I mean, this is a new kid on the block. He does things his own way. Let's give him a chance and see how some of these unorthodox method, that departs, completely from the way the diplomatic business is transacted. Let's see, how this could work. But, at the end of the day, all the examples that you've cited, the most recent of which is Rwanda, DRC, we've seen that what he pushes forward is strong American trade interest. And so that is the driver. The driver is not really, caring that there is global peace. Now, it is too platonic to stick, and that is the reason we see these things actually begin to fall apart even before the ink with which the, agreements and ceasefires were signed could dry up. And I think we're going to see more of that happening, because we don't need more example to see that, they don't work. The experiments that, he has put forth, they are not working as intended. And so ultimately, what I see the world doing is going back to the fundamentals. Begin the peace initiatives by generating, local political will, and then expand it from there going forward.
And in the case of Rwanda and DRC, it's almost as though you find even in Washington, the body language shows that, well, they didn't seem quite in quote committed. It's still very tense and hostile, body language, and it's almost as though it's a forced, truce. Maybe threatened, maybe forced, maybe issue of trades, and you calculate how much is going to come in when you look at all of the trade deal they're going to have with the US. But why do we not have, again, I'm going back to that regional stability, because the people who are most affected are those who live around these countries where you have the conflict. Why do we not find, especially in the case of Africa, the countries within the continent step in to say we are most affected, we understand the situation, we understand the history of this crisis, and so we can mediate better than any other country from outside of the continent?
Indeed. The peace agreement between DRC and Rwanda, represents a moment of opportunity, but one that is fraught with peril. Its success will be measured not in iconic handshakes in Washington, but in whether Congolese and Rwandans on the ground live in safety, whether displaced communities can rebuild, and whether this region's immense mineral wealth benefits local population rather than external interests. As the world watches, let's hope for genuine transformation, but hold all parties accountable. And this is something that Trump doesn't appear to have factored sufficiently in when he negotiates this so-called peace. Because peace built on paper without justice, security, and equity is no peace at all. And so this perhaps is one of the lessons that people have got to learn, out of this, because it's almost as if what we're saying is it's not if or whether this, peace or truce is going to break down. It's a matter of when. How soon is it going to break down? We need to depart from that.
I mean, very interesting conversation as always with you. Thank you so much for your time. I just want to let everyone know that once again, you can read Collins Onweke's opinion editorial is on TVC News website, www.tvcnews.tv. It's titled, "When Ceasefire is Not Peace, a Lens on Trump Pauses Called Peace." Again, very brilliant. Thank you so much for putting that together. And a pleasure to have you on as always. A Global Affairs Analyst, Collins Onweke.
Thank you. Thank you again, Precious. Thank you for having me.